So it's the dead of winter, 1919. And World War I has been officially over for months.
Right.
The armistice is signed, the ticker tape parades have all happened, and the world is supposed to be completely at peace.
Supposed to be.
Right. So why are thousands of American soldiers currently fighting and, well, freezing and dying in these dense, snow-covered forests in Russia?
Yeah, it's wild.
Today we are pulling a single thread from a small-town American Legion post to kind of unravel this theory of the entire 20th century.
It really radically shifts your perspective when you look at history this way.
Yeah.
I mean, you stop seeing just the massive macro events, the sweeping movements of empires, and you start seeing the deeply personal ideological bloodlines that connect them.
Yeah.
You start to see how a single idea, born in one era, sort of mutates to define the next one.
And that is exactly what we are exploring for you today.
Yeah.
And this research centers on the American Legion, specifically Wisconsin Post 70 in Oshkosh. And it explores how a concept called 100% Americanism was forged in the fires of the Civil War and World War I.
And to understand the philosophy of Post 70, the research insists we have to trace its origins back through this sort of ideological family tree.
All the way back to the Civil War, right?
Exactly. Back to a single defining figure from the Civil War.
Right.
So the Post historian breaks down this lineage really clearly. You have the fathers of Post 70.
Okay.
These are the returning World War I veterans, mostly from the 127th and 128th Infantry Regiments.
The 32nd Division.
Right, the 32nd. The Allied command in Europe actually called them the Red Arrows because of their ability to pierce basically every enemy line they encountered.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's the fathers. Then, stepping back a generation, you have the grandfather, which the research identifies as Brigadier General Charles R. Boardman.
Yeah.
He was the architect of that 32nd Division, a local newspaper editor, and basically a central pillar of the Oshkosh community.
But the root of all this, the great-grandfather of Oshkosh Post 70, is a man named Captain George Washington Burnell. Locally, later in life in Oshkosh, he was known as Judge Burnell. But during the Civil War, he was the commander of Company C of the 19th Regiment of U.S. Colored Troops.
And Burnell's combat record is absolutely central to the research. Like, it details his time at the Battle of the Crater during the grueling siege of Petersburg.
Oh, that was just absolute butchery.
Completely. I mean, the Union Army literally detonated a massive mine under the Confederate lines, creating a literal crater, and then Union troops charged right into it and just got completely trapped.
Yeah, a total disaster.
And Burnell was critically wounded there and under incredibly heavy fire. Keep in mind, these are Black soldiers who knew they faced immediate execution or enslavement if Confederate forces captured them.
Right.
They literally carried their stricken captain off the battlefield on their shoulders.
The mutual loyalty forged in that moment is just astounding. And the research points out that after Burnell healed from those critical wounds, his combat days were functionally over.
He could have just gone home.
Exactly. He could have easily retired his commission, gone back to Wisconsin, but he refused to abandon his men.
Wow.
He went right back to the brutal, static trench warfare of the Petersburg siege, just to serve in an administrative capacity.
He just wanted to make sure they had supplies.
Yeah, he wanted to ensure his unit had what they needed to survive, which really sets up the breathless final campaign outlined in the research, in the spring of 1865.
Right. The road to Appomattox. Lee and the starving remnants of his army are just racing for Appomattox Station where these supply trains are waiting.
Because if Lee gets those supplies, he can slip away. The war could just keep going indefinitely.
But it's a photo finish. Lee's artillery gets to the station, but they get intercepted by Union cavalry commanded by, of all people, a young Colonel George Armstrong Custer.
And Custer, realizing he has, no time to wait for infantry support, just orders a direct cavalry charge against 30 deployed Confederate artillery pieces.
Which the research calls totally suicidal.
Oh, today we would absolutely consider it suicidal. But that aggressive initiative captured the guns before the infantry could reinforce them.
Cutting off Lee's lifeline.
Exactly. And the research credits this with saving countless Union lives by shortening the war. It forces the climax at Appomattox. Lee is essentially in denial. He orders Major General John B. Gordon to lead one final breakout charge.
Right into the morning fog.
Yeah. Gordon's troops advance, bayonets fixed, expecting to just sweep aside Sheridan's cavalry.
But the cavalry pulls back, and emerging from the mist is the massive 25th Corps of the Army of the James. And right at the center of that wall of Union infantry is the 19th U.S. Colored Troops.
With Captain Burnell right there in the column.
Gordon takes one look and sends word back to Lee, "My lines can advance no further." It forced the surrender.
Yeah.
It's an incredible cinematic moment, but I have to ask, and I think you listening might be wondering the same thing.
Yeah.
How does the trauma of a Civil War siege translate to a veterans meeting 54 years later?
Right.
Like, how does a 19th century soldier relate to a 20th century world war?
That is the exact bridge we need to cross here. Because to understand it, we have to move from the battlefields of 1865 to a speaker's platform in Oshkosh on October 2, 1919.
Okay.
Standing on that platform, addressing these new World War I veterans, are Captain Burnell and General Boardman. And they aren't up there reminiscing. They are warning these young men about a mutated ideological threat.
Which brings us to the core of the author's argument about redefining 100% Americanism.
Yes.
Every American Legion meeting begins with this preamble about fostering a 100% Americanism. And today, that just sounds like generic patriotism.
Right. Flag waving.
Exactly, but the research argues vehemently that it's not a synonym for patriotism. The author's point is that veterans don't need to be taught patriotism. They just bled for it.
Yeah, they proved it. Instead, the post-historian argues it was an explicit antidote to a new global sickness, Bolshevism and Marxist ideologies.
And the connection here is fascinating. Think about Burnell. He's a Civil War vet, steeped in the abolitionist crusade. When he looked at Bolshevism, the research argues it sounded exactly like the pseudoscientific psychotic thinking used to justify slavery.
It's a really profound parallel. Slavery relied on this horrific idea that certain humans were biologically destined for subjugation. It completely removed their individual moral agency.
Just cogs in a machine.
Exactly. And when Burnell looked at Marxism, he saw the same deterministic architecture. The Bolshevik idea that individuals are just swept along by the scientific laws of history and therefore violence against millions is totally justified for progress.
So to combat this, they needed a constitutional antidote.
Right. The post-historian claims America was uniquely positioned against this because Marxism demanded the violent extermination of the traditional ruling class, royalty, nobility, the bourgeoisie.
But the author argues America had no such established aristocracy. The text actually claims we only had a few industrial tycoons.
Yes, meaning America functionally escaped the Marxist indictment.
Therefore, the American Constitution, based on divine rights and the consent of the governed, was the only ideological shield left against these new scientific dictatorships.
That's the argument.
But wait, I have to push back on that. The research says America had no bourgeoisie, just a few industrial tycoons. But wouldn't the massive labor movements of 1990, like the International Workers of the World, which is literally mentioned in the text, wouldn't they strongly disagree with the idea that America had no ruling class?
Oh, without a doubt.
I mean, they were fighting bloody strikes in the street.
And in the post-historian's view, the Constitution is the ultimate flawless counterbalance to Marxist ideology, completely bypassing the industrial wealth disparity because of its structural consent of the governed.
Okay, understood. So while Burnell is philosophizing on stage in 1919, the research points out this wasn't just a theoretical battle.
No, not at all.
American troops were actually fighting and dying against Bolshevism, while the rest of the country thought World War I was over.
This is the secret war in the snow.
Yeah. It's a shocking detail to many, but World War I didn't end in Russia on November 11th, 1918.
President Woodrow Wilson, very reluctantly, ordered 2 limited American expeditionary forces into Russia.
Right, so you had the North Russia force in Archangel,
which was the 339th Infantry, mostly guys from Michigan, under British command fighting these bitter winter skirmishes against Bolsheviks just to secure supplies.
And then the Siberia deployment.
Right, the 27th and 31st Infantry. And they were navigating this chaotic mix of White Russians, Japanese imperial ambitions in Manchuria, and tens of thousands of stranded Czech Legion soldiers along the Trans-Siberian Railway.
The post-historian characterizes Wilson's orders as Vietnam all over again.
Yeah, that's the exact phrase.
Because Wilson wanted strict neutrality. He told them, just protect the supplies and aid the Czechs, do not take sides. But of course, they were inevitably dragged into this pseudo-civil war.
You can't just drop troops into that and expect neutrality.
No. For you listening, think about it. It sounds like being sent to break up a massive bar fight, but your boss tells you that you aren't allowed to throw a punch or pick a side, even when the patrons start throwing bottles at your head.
That's exactly what it was like. You just get hit with bottles. And this tactical failure in the snow brings us to
The big macro claims.
the author blames the failure of this specific Russian intervention for nearly every modern conflict.
It's a staggering list of causalities. The research argues that because Wilson didn't forcefully crush Bolshevism in 1918 or 1919, he made World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Cold War, and even Desert Storm entirely inevitable.
Yeah, the claims are incredibly far-reaching. The author asserts that the very same revolutionaries in the Kremlin were the ones who conspired to assassinate Archduke Ferdinand back in 1914, an ideological destabilization network. Then there's the idea that National Socialism in Germany rose merely as the next best thing in science to stop the Red Terror coming out of Ukraine and the Urals.
Basically, a desperate reactionary movement.
Right, and maybe the wildest one. Due to a lack of leadership from Wilson and FDR, the U.S. led its military atrophy, which meant we lost Japan as an ally.
Meaning Japan allied with the Nazis simply because they shared a Soviet enemy and felt abandoned by a weak U.S. The Post-historian is drawing a straight, unbroken line from Wilson's hesitation in Siberia directly to Tojo bombing Pearl Harbor and then all the way to the Vietnam War. It's like blaming a single dropped pass in the first quarter of a football game for a team's losing season a decade later.
The key is why the author makes this leap.
Okay.
Because it perfectly aligns with Captain Burnell's 1919 prophetic warning. If you believe this ism is a terminal virus, a fundamental denial of moral agency, then failing to eradicate it on day one inevitably infects the whole century.
Right. If you don't cure the disease, you own all the symptoms.
Exactly.
So, bringing it all back home to Oshkosh, Wilson pulled the troops out by 1920, but the men of Post-70 listened to Burnell.
They did. The research details this local legacy. A man named Earl Fuller heard that warning, and later, his children, including Earl Bryce Fuller, who died in combat in 1943, literally carried Burnell's torch into World War II to fight those new isms.
And Captain Burnell passed away in 1921, fittingly on October 2nd, which was exactly 2 years to the day after his speech.
And General Boardman lived until 1950.
So to summarize all of this for you, we started with a Civil War hero at the Battle of the Crater. We traced his fear of pseudoscientific ideologies to a veterans meeting in Oshkosh. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. And remember to keep questioning history.